I don't have the telescope set up in this one, but I'm curious, but we'll pretend like it's there for our imagination. So that's that. There we go. This is where you guys started at the beginning of it. So we have our geometry, we have our light setup, things appear to be working. So looking at the documentation, what we want to do is the very first part. We want to get a UV snapshot out of Maya and save some what looks just like this. So UV snapshots are pretty straightforward. Eventually you're going to be doing UVs. You see that in modeling fundamentals. To some degree, it's going to be kind of a fairly simple project in that class. And then later on in the month, when you later on in the program, you get some of your advanced problem classes. We're going to start peeling back the layers. We're going to get way much more complicated UV class. But let's talk about what UVs are. And you guys think you actually know what UVs are? Looking at this, if this is the UV editor, it's a different window that perhaps you guys haven't been in yet. But do you think looking at this, you understand what this is trying to tell you? Like this looking at this UV video. Odd looking, right? Let me just kind of select a couple things. You can sort of see what this is relating to. See this?
Okay.
You got it. You're totally right about it. You're looking at flat reversion of the 3D model. And so I know it probably makes sense looking at it. Okay, we'll be flattened down. Why do we do that? So what you're actually seeing is this is the bridge between the 3D world and the 2D world. They're completely different. So when you have a 2D texture and you're trying to put that on a 3D surface, there has to be something there to tell Maya how to apply that to it, right? Like, does it wrap around like wrapping paper? And if it does, how does it know where wrapping paper goes? What directions it facing? Is the wrapping paper bigger in one section than in one section? Where does it have the seams, right? Because when you unfold wrapping paper, it's cut in certain areas. When you kind of wrap it around, the tape that's holding it together, there's a seam somewhere. Where is the seam located? I mean, really, that's exactly
Okay.
what it is.
So tonight we're going to go over just some basic stuff inside of Digital Painting 2. If you guys are watching this and you want to let me know who's here, just so I know, and can answer any questions that you might have about Digital Painting 2 or Substance Painter. So for tonight, we're going to just kind of go over some stuff. Nothing too crazy, but kind of give you some tips and tricks about painting stuff inside of Substance Painter. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go to New File, and we are going to open up a new object, and let's see if we can't get the file I was using. That's the TV. Let's see here. Oh, shader ball. That's what I was looking for. I assume it's one I'm looking for. Let's see. Yes, it is. Okay. So we created this shader ball. You guys have seen it. You've downloaded it. You've done all this kind of stuff. So just so you guys are aware, you have ball bottom, which is a material, and you have ball top, which is a material. So it's the same thing we talked about in some of the other videos, and we're just going to kind of go over some of these things and how to go about painting your objects to make them look, as realistic as possible. Okay. So again, for you all that are in here right now, I see that there's 2 of you. If you want to say hey, just so I know who's in here, that'd be great. And just let me know if you have any questions or anything that pop up. Just type it in the chat, excuse me, and we'll be able to help you out and answer anything you might have. So tonight we're going to talk about just doing different materials and different textures and stuff like that. But we're gonna talk about using all these different materials that come with it and how you go about making your own stuff. So, for instance, like if we use the ball top, let's say for whatever reason it was just like we use just a brass. Okay, so I'm going to look through here. I'm going to find the brass. Here's gold. Let's use gold. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag it into my layers. And I've got this gold material on here. Okay, now by itself it's not really that big a deal, but that's the whole point, is that it's not supposed to be that big a deal because we're going to just start playing around and seeing some of the other things that we can go about playing with. All right, so there's always this different layers, and that's the biggest thing, is like you want different layers of different things so that you can kind of play around and play and work. Shannon, hey, glad you made it. And we're just going to kind of to play around and see what we're going to get. So we're going to start with gold. All right, and what you get is once you add a gold, you have all these attributes. You have height, base color, roughness. All right, and you can always play with this stuff to see what it does. Okay, so you can make it shinier, make it less shiny, whatever you want to do. All right, so I encourage you to play around with some of this stuff. Now, 9 times out of 10, the materials are not clean. So it's the same thing with modeling. Everything has an edge on it, but nothing is completely 90 degrees. Everything is dinged up, dirty, broken, stuff like that. So you want to keep the same idea that you have with that with your painting inside a Substance Painter. Nothing is going to be 100% clean because it doesn't look realistic. So it's all about layering different objects and different things on top of other stuff. And don't be afraid to use things that you may not think are, exactly what should be used it for. So like if I use like a wood material and I put it over top of something else, it might give me a really cool option. Did I have to bake the mesh? I have to, but I haven't done it yet. I just applied this to it for right now. Let's go ahead and we'll do that for right now. So go ahead and bake mesh maps. We always need to bake them. It's saying the IDs aren't there, which they aren't because we didn't make IDs, so don't worry about that error. So we'll go back to doing what we were playing with here. We have gold. All I did was just add a gold material to it. Nothing too major. But we can go in and we can start playing around with other things that just work, or that play around, and we can add in other options. So we have smart materials and materials like we've talked about before. Smart materials are going to give you some dirt options, things like that. And we have materials. We also have filters, some brushes that we can paint our own things into, procedurals, which are always good. And then alphas, which we can paint on, which, again, kind of going over some stuff we've already kind of been through, because we're just kind of seeing what we can kind of go through here. All right, so we've got all this. We got our fabric. We got, what is this? Ground gravel, leather, mortar wall. Okay, so let's just play with some of this stuff. So I want to create dirt on this. Okay, I want it to be dirty. I don't want it to be perfectly clean. So let's maybe try some mortar wall. Okay, so if I add mortar wall over top of it, you can see here that it applies it over top of this layer. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to right click, add a black mask. Okay, and in this black mask is where we can go through and we can add in some other things. Okay, so what we can do is we can add in some masks. All right, because we have a mask here, but there's also masks down here. Okay, so if you look at this, you can kind of see some of these smart masks that maybe we haven't played with before. Okay, so we have edges rust, edges scratches, strong. So a bunch of this stuff is play with it. See what you get, because there could be some really cool things that maybe I don't even know about. I mean, I'm sure there's stuff that I don't even know about, and we can really play around with it and get some really cool effects. So because we're in smart masks and we have like dust scratches or dust soft. Let's try the dust soft. So on our mortar wall here, if I drag this over to our dust soft, because I had it selected, it now added this little layer of dust, if you can kind of see it. Okay. So another thing is we're only playing with it at 1024. Excuse me. So with us playing at 1024, we need to go ahead and crank this up just a little bit so we can see stuff. So I'm going to put it at 2K, and we get a little bit better results as far as kind of seeing what we're playing with here. And then the cool part about it is, again, as we're playing around with this stuff and we go back to our mask editor for our mortar, we have blur, the textures, the ambient occlusion, the curvature map, and you can see how it's changing and giving us, different values and bringing all these like little things in, which is cool because then we can kind of see what it's doing as we're working on it. You can also play around with the texture color, which will change if you add a little bit more to it. You can also add things like we can invert some of this stuff, the roughness. So if you can see it over here, you can see how it's basically breaking up the roughness of our object. So it's basically taking something and like blurring it out or making it so it's not as shiny as the other part. Okay, and that's what you want. Like you want it to kind of break into these things. Now, anything that doesn't work the way you want it to, then you'd go through and you'd play with some more values just to kind of, see what it does, play around with it. So we've done with the mortar because this is the actual material. This mask is what the mask is actually affecting. So this is where you're looking at your mask for this. So on here, let's go ahead and click on our mask editor here. And we've just used this one, just dragged it in. We can come through and we can start messing with textures. We can mess with the balance of things. So you can kind of see like how we're getting different little values kind of pumping in and out here. Contrast, so the edge quality, so whether it's blurry or whether it's kind of messed up. So we can play around with this and we can get things the way we want. And as we're doing this, we can also even, just adjust random seed. So we can hit random and it'll build another random seed. You can invert it. So it might give you, a better result based off of the inversion. And you can see all our bake maps and all that kind of stuff. So it's all stuff that we've gone over. It's just kind of playing around with it. Now, excuse me. Part of this is you don't necessarily want to just leave it at this. You don't want to leave anything default. You don't want to leave anything just sitting there and just be like, this is what we're going to do. You always want to have nice detail and dirt and grime and stuff like that. Because remember, like I said, nothing that we build is ever going to be just one thing and just be clean. Everything's going to have dirt and grime and all this kind of stuff. Now, let's say I did this, but this is really, really shiny, right? So we got dirt, but the rest of it's pretty shiny. And it's like, while it looks cool, maybe there's other stuff on top of it. So maybe there's not just that. Maybe it's something else that goes into it. So, excuse me. So if we were to do something like this and we need to play around with it and get better results or more results, then you have to think of it like this. I've done this one thing, but I can always add more. So if I click on this and I add something else, dirt ground, for instance, let's drag this over top. I'm now getting a dirt ground material that is now over top of our other material. So I'm getting this dirt material that's now over top of the other one. So then again, you're playing multiple pieces here, but it's also affecting. So if you come over here, and if you remember in Paul's class, he goes over doing different material blending modes. Same deal here. Come over here and go to multiply. We can change our material modes. We can go to overlay, bring in some other stuff, which will then allow you to change some values and bring some other stuff in that maybe you didn't have before, but you get some cool results. Maybe something that works a little bit better for what you're trying to do. Your opacity levels. So if you want something to be a little bit dirty and you want it to show through, it's the same idea, okay? Because you're going to play around with it, so you want to always kind of just check and see if this is actually like helping versus whether or not it's just going full out. So I accidentally deleted that, so we're just going to leave it that way. But you can bring in some other values and kind of really play around with those values. So with that, variations help a ton, and you can vary some of this stuff by using brushes. You can play around with some of this stuff just by messing around with something. So if I needed this to be a lot cleaner on the front, I could literally right click. We could do an add a paint layer. You could go to a brush, and you could do like, I don't know, let's find a dirt one. For its ink splatter, scratches, paint spray, mold. Why not mold? Let's give it a shot. So with the mold, you can paint it in. You can see how we're getting different values because we're allowing this to go through, but we're using this paint layer as another layer to kind of bring stuff around. Okay, so you can play around with this and you can get some very cool effects. All right, and so the best thing in the world for you to do is one of the things that I talked about in the very beginning of the class was how I had you guys look at a material and kind of do that said material and make it as close as you possibly can. It's the same idea now. You're still doing that, but you can do it to a little bit more because you know some of these tools, you know that you can play around with it. All right. So you can get some other options and some other stuff in there. So like there's other scratches and dings, and let's try like, so if we go to scratches here, excuse me, we can come in and we can paint scratches in. We can adjust the size. All right. We can get different scratches, different feelings, all this kind of stuff. And again, you can sit there and play with some of the adjustment values so you get them subtle. Remember, subtlety is the key. Okay. The more subtle stuff that you add, the better it kind of looks. So if you look at that, like that's looking pretty cool, and we haven't really done a lot. Okay, so I'm going to scratch this guy up. All right, I'm going to put a little bit more down here. All right, so I'm just kind of playing around, and I'm getting some of the scratches in some of the areas that you wouldn't normally get scratches in. So let's do this. We'll bring down. So like this area where stuff is really shiny, maybe there's some scratches in there that we just don't see. Okay, so we'll go through this and we'll play around with it. So while you're using the generator, and the generators are wonderful. Okay, I get it. They're great. They've got a lot of really cool things. I will tell you this. If you put nothing but a generator on your demo reel and you were to send this out to get a job, 9 times out of 10, the person that's looking at it is going to go, that's a generator straight out of Substance. And if that's what you're going to put on there to send this out to somebody, might as well just not send them anything at all because they will judge you for it. So you want to always paint something else into what you're working on. Spend the time to sit there and really just nail it. Okay, work on it and really tweak it and get some nice textures in there and really just do your own thing. Don't just leave it as it is and say, oh, a generator's fine, because you're getting paid to do what I'm doing right now. You're not getting paid to click a button that says generator. Okay, so always kind of play around and do whatever you need to do, and then you can always add in more stuff. So we're doing this for dirt, right? And we know this is dirt. So the mortar wall, if we know that that's what that is, we can always come in here, and while it says mortar wall, I'm going to go ahead and do parentheses dirt. Okay, so then I know that that's my dirt that I added. Okay, mortar wall, added some dirt. We're good with that. Now let's say if you wanted to paint something on this. So now that the dirt's over top of it, we know as we're building this stuff, think about how a real material is made. Okay, you have your metal material, something that's primered or painted on top of it, the scratches, the rust, and then the dirt from everything else. So think about it like that, and then that's how you should set up your materials. So if I've done this and I've broke down, got some dirt in there, it looks pretty cool. But now I'm I'd like to put in maybe some kind of paint. Okay, so let's maybe do a car paint in between. Okay, and if you notice, the dirt's still there. Okay, but I have this car paint. So let's go ahead and we'll do a black mask. And then I'm going to go and do smart mask, and I'm going to see what we got here because we might be able to pull something off. So look at this. Paint old. What is this going to do? So that put paint old in there. Go to my mask editor, global invert on, because I just want it to kind of break apart here. And now you can see that I'm getting, excuse me, I'm getting paint on certain areas, and the chrome or the brass is kind of coming through, or the gold's coming through. So you can do things like this, and then do multiple pieces here to kind of break this stuff up and do different things with it. So I wonder if there's anything better. There's like rust ground, surface worn. I wonder if that would be better. So let's try this. We'll get rid of that. I'm going to do a surface worn. And then I'm going to do an invert on this guy. And we get like this interesting kind of look, like where it's just worn surface. All right. So you can see now that we're kind of playing with this. We'll change the color of this right here. Maybe it's like a, maybe it's like black or something, like tarnish. Okay. So you can see how this is all like affecting and doing different things and really playing around with it. We're not messing with the height values and all that, but it's multiple pieces being brought in to make one thing. Okay, it's not just one thing and then it's done. So if we take this, we can also adjust opacities. All right, so maybe it's just slight dust. You can kind of change any of your pieces here. So if we change that to a screen, you notice how it took away the color value and it flipped it. So now we're getting this, and it almost looks like it's got like a dust, like almost like a clay dust that's kind of on it. Okay, so it's all this stuff that kind of goes into it, and I'm telling you guys this because I've seen this in a bunch of not necessarily your turn-ins, but in turn-ins that I've seen in the past. Everybody seems to do one thing. They throw a material on there and maybe a dirt, and then they don't do anything else. Okay, and while I get it, there's a lot of times that you can do things that will really help sell this. That'll really help sell some of these things off, and it just takes a little bit of time for you to do this stuff. Okay, so if we were to add a generator, okay, so I'm going to go into the generator, I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to come down here to position, or let's do position. Let's do position. So if you notice the way that this is, I'm going to go ahead and invert it. We've got dark down here and light up here to where it's not really affecting. Okay, so what that's doing is it's basically taking the position and saying this is where I want this to be lit, this is where I want this to be shown. So you can kind of see this where it goes over this, but it's not mixing with the underneath one. So if you want to make it mix with the underneath one, we have different values. So if we go multiply, we now are getting this value to where we're getting this in here. We can do a global blur, contrast. We can mix this up so where it looks like it's dirty on the bottom, but it's getting cleaner at the top. Okay, so then you can use these to kind of build in multiple pieces. So like if you had a rusty piece of whatever, you can go through that and do that. Now you can also use textures that will allow you to do where it'll break it up based off of the texture. So right now this is just doing off of a straight color. So what's white will show, what's black is not. So if you were to come in and do a texture value, so if we had like, let's see here, I'm sure we can pull something in. Alpha grunges. Let's see if we can do this. So watch this. So if we drag this and drop this on here, it will break up the value. And you just have to kind of play with it and see what it does, because it's not always going to be perfect the way it is. We can break up the value on here and get a different look. Okay, so let's find something. Let's see, alphas, grunges. I'm hoping that the grunges are actually working and not, let's do this. because it doesn't look like it's doing too much. But that's how it should work. I'm probably doing something wrong. I guarantee you I'm doing something wrong. Let's see. I'll play around with that and let you guys know. But anyway, let's go ahead and fix this real quick. You can see that this is actually going through and changing all these values, and you're getting dirt and all this kind of stuff. This is what I want you guys thinking of while you're painting this stuff, because if you can pull off cool detailed scratches and dirt and models and all that kind of stuff, then you can paint anything you guys have and sell it to anybody that's like looking. And I don't mean sell it as in like make money. I mean sell it as in like, does it look believable? Does it look like it needs something else? You know, you can kind of play around with it. And that's what I want you to do. And that's what I want you to really like spend some time thinking about. And then we can always do other things, like in one of the TV assignments we have where we want just normal maps on here so that it just does like a cool little like speaker grill, for instance. So let's say that this was a speaker. All right. So we would come in and we could do another layer. And then these add different layers into our values, into our dirt, all this kind of stuff. All right. So if we add another layer, and let's do, I know I'm going to screw this one up. Let's go ahead and remove this real quick. Add a fill layer. I'm just going to turn off colors, roughness, metal. I'm going to leave on normal and height because I don't want it to affect anything. So again, sorry, that was my bad. I added a fill layer, or I added a layer. I need to add a fill layer. So now that I have this, I have height in my normal. So I can then take things like any of these, procedurals and turn this into something. So let's check this guy. And we put this in here. And if you notice, it pops up and it's got this, it's like huge. Okay, so we want to scale it down. So if we scroll up to the top for the fill layer, we can come in here and we can change the scale. So let's say 15. Okay, so that one right there is giving us this value. Then we would come back down and we can check, we can do the square scale. Okay, we can do circle border width. All right, so there's a lot of different options that you can kind of play with that will give you different values and things that maybe you just didn't know, or maybe you just haven't, played around with. So we've got this, and if this is going to be our, our material here, let's go ahead and let's do some stuff. So I don't want this everywhere. I just wanted it here, okay? Because I don't want it everywhere. I don't care to want it everywhere. So if I go ahead and I add a black mask, and I go ahead and I add paint, what I can do in the paint option is I can go to my brushes here. Do you see brushes? There's brushes. So I can come in here and I can paint and I can get values put in. Okay, so you can do things like that and you can get stuff put in. You can also change the flow and make it so that it maybe doesn't come in so hot. All right, so you get it a little bit lighter. You can do all that kind of fun stuff, but we're just doing this value here. So we're just making a screen, so it doesn't really matter for this. But let's go ahead and we can paint it, okay? But we can also do this. If you come over here, we have the option to do polygon fill. If we go polygon fill and we go to the 3D, 2D section here, you can kind of see what we're looking at as far as our polygon fill. So we're seeing this is where we're painting, and then these are all the polygons we want. If you drag and select, see how it's filling in polygons? This is something that you could do to help grab some of this stuff and help you line stuff up. So you don't necessarily have to do like hand painting all of this. Like we could paint some of this, but we basically were faking the paint because we're going in and we're kind of cheating. But is it cheating if it works really well and it's not really hurting anybody? We're going to get this really going here. I think we're good. So we're going to kind of play around with this. Just kind of get these as much as we can here. So as we're going around, we're just kind of hitting these. Let's see here. Again, while I'm doing this, this would be a perfect time. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. If you don't, that's fine too. Just reaching out, let you guys know. I'm going to try to see if I can't do this. And then we're going to play around with some of the values here. Okay, so we got this. And I'm going to go ahead and turn that, go back to the regular brush tool. And you can kind of see we've got our, it's almost like a speaker system kind of put in here, right? So we don't want that to be gold like everything else. We want it to be kind of like a nice material that could go on it for like a speaker, okay? So I'm going to look around. I'm going to find a fabric base. I feel like fabric rough would be pretty cool, okay? So if I go ahead and I apply a fabric rough, and we'll put that there, and again, we're going to adjust some of the parameters. The scale for the UV, I'm going to go 15 too much, probably too much. Let's try 8. So a lot of this is just kind of playing around. Like you don't necessarily know if this is perfect, but you're going to play around with it. So that's looking pretty cool, right? So now what I would do is I could go ahead and I could copy what I did here. So if I right click on this and I copy mask and I come up here, right click, add a black mask, but now I'm going to paste into mask. So then what that did was it took the mask that I copied and pasted it in there, and then now I have that same value here. Now I can come through and I can change my other values. So let's change this to like a dark gray. Now you can see how I'm getting multiple materials in here. That is creating this, like, I don't know, my sphere speaker thing. Okay? But now this is, you know, going through this is where we can come in and we can be like, speaker. And you want to make sure that you're trying your best to keep everything as clean as you can. So we're going to go speaker, fabric. And then the black paint was dirt. And then gold is what gold is. We're going to leave that one alone. So now we can play around and we've got this so that we can kind of play around with this. I missed some stuff right here. It's not that huge of a deal, but I can feel Shannon judging me from here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clean that up. No, I can't really feel you judging me from here. I feel like you want to judge me from there, but go ahead and just kind of get this just a little bit. Okay. So we've got that. Now, if you missed anything and you screwed up, all you have to do is when you're on your paint layer and we're selecting the ones that we need, okay, and you accidentally maybe selected something you didn't need to, you just change this back to black and then select those polygons again and it will switch it back. Okay, so nothing too major, but that one is on there. This one is my my maps, so I can go through. Yeah, maybe judging me. I get it. So now I can come in here and I click back on my speaker fabric part, and I'm going to make sure that I get all of this cleared up. Going to save it real quick. That was not me. That was it's saving on its own there. Okay. So now we've got this, and I mean, it kind of looks like a speaker, but we're just kind of playing around with this. So another thing, let's say you wanted to put a logo on the speaker. You can do things, you can add another paint layer, or we can add something else to it. So let's say we were going to paint something on this real quick. We can go ahead and add, let's do another fill layer. The reason I like fill layers is because you can change it to whatever you need it to be. So If you want to do a fill layer, that's cool. If you wanted to like paint something, that's fine too. If you wanted to just have a solid color on there, so maybe we do like something green, okay? We can go through here and we can change. We can turn off roughness. We can turn off metal. We can turn off normals. We can have it just affect just the paint, okay? So as we take this, again, it's all about masks. It's all about non-destructive workflow because that's what we want to do. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add some paint to this. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go to my alphas. And this is our brush, but we can change it and put something in here. So like, let's find something that's like a logo or something. Excuse me. We'll do the flower. I'm going to scale this up. All right. Because that's now on my paintbrush, I can click and I can get this value. Now, if you're wondering, why did it do that? Like, why did it just apply this in the center here, but it's not the same size? That's because of all the settings on the brush. So if I have flow and size and all this kind of stuff, there's all these things like spacing, size jitter, we can turn that off, angle jitter, turn that off. And then what that'll do now is that'll say, okay, I just want it to be that big and that's it. So as we go back through and we play around with this, we're going to check our height. We got roughness, we got metal. So our roughness, we can have either rough or shiny. It's got a lot of stuff going on here, so it's not necessarily going to show us being shiny immediately, but you can kind of see like how we're, we've got a little bit of shine to it. And then what we do is what we've been doing is we've been going in and we've been using iRay to render and get some cool shots. So you can kind of see how it's kind of shining just a little bit in the corners, which is cool. All right, so then we get these cool, all this stuff that we've been adding in. And you can add in more details. You can even add in multiple, like the fabric. There's that. Hold on, let's try this. So that's the fabric. It was a fill layer. We went ahead and added in a paint, like, a value or something. So what if we did it another way? So again, if we add another fill layer, this time I'm going to bring it down here. Excuse me, sorry. Let's go ahead and we're going to have it not affect color. We're not going to affect the roughness or the metal. But this one we'll do add a black mask. We'll go paint. And then this one we'll go back to our brushes. And we're going to add, we're going to do some scratches. Here we go. Some scratches here. Go ahead and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Now watch this. Because we're just doing the same thing that we did for this, but now I'm painting it. We can then do, our values in here. And we may have to adjust our, let's check this normal height. Whoops. Okay. So we've set to 0. That's why it wasn't showing. You can kind of see how we're adding in scratches, but now this is part of our, this is part of the normal map now. So you're getting more and more detail in there, which will help bring out some of this value that you're trying to get. And it could be any one of these, like it doesn't have to be anything specific, but once you set up your value, you get all this cool surface detail that you could then put into your maps and make sure that it's, got these different values in it. So this will then help you set some of this stuff up so that things aren't perfect, all the way through, right? And because we put this above it, we're going over top of some of these other values. Let's just kind of play around. So again, my big thing is like play. Just see what these things are doing. Play with some of these values. Really get into it because some of this stuff is, got some really cool things that you can kind of get away with and do some things. And you might be able to pull some really cool stuff out and do a little bit like, okay, for instance, we've been doing this for 39 minutes. 39 minutes and we've got this. Okay, and I'm playing. I didn't sit down and say we're going to make this speaker thing. We're just playing. So if you guys have reference and you're doing this stuff, you can come up with lots of little things. So again, make thing, iterative, different layers, name your layers, set things up, and play with your values and really just like kind of deconstruct how certain things are done, and you can make some very cool materials for something that you can then render out, especially for like our class. If you're doing all this really cool work, let's see here, you can see all the detail and the scratches and stuff. So like play with that stuff, get that all in there and get that going, because then you can really use this later on when you're trying to create your own textures. And that, again, that's the whole point. That's really what I'm trying to tell you guys. You can do anything you want in this. You can really spend some time making some really cool things. So why not do it? Like, make some really cool things. Look at, textures like what dirt does to metal when you do something, or what plastic looks like when it's been rolled through the mud, or been scratched up, or been in a dog's mouth for 5 years because the dog's played with it every day. You know what I mean? So learn to kind of play around with that. Variation is great. Where is something where is something scratched versus where is something dirty, all that kind of fun stuff. So for instance, like the car paint, if we had like somebody, like, so the mortar wall, like the dirt layer that we had, right? We had a paint layer on there, which gives us values to like where something is, and then you have your mask. It's like you can come in and you can add more dirt to the different layers, and you can sit there and really like play with it and just see what it's like, and play around with multiple layers to get all this, stuff. And the more random, better it's going to be. Layers, always use multiple layers. Save it. I don't know why you said ooh. I don't know what it was about. I'm sorry. Save it and kind of see like what you're doing with your multiple layers, and just break it down. It's cool to kind of just break stuff down and see what you're kind of getting at. Now, if you notice, like, it's a little, it's got a little bit of like some value shift in here. So let's go ahead and let's do 4K and see what it does. Now, remember, the higher you go, the longer it's going to take to render out. So you don't want to work in 4K versus 2K or whatever. I work in 1K mostly. Upres it to 2 when I need to like look at it. But you can see like the better detail you get. But also, are you really going to be sending out 8K materials for this? Probably not. Going to send out 8K materials for anything? Probably not, because it's a lot of materials, unless you really were trying to show off some sort of prop. So don't be afraid to kind of just go around and like just really like spend some time, playing around with it. That's really like, I know I keep going back to it, but that's really all I'm trying to tell you, because I just want you guys to, everybody to kind of just look at this and be like, okay, if I do this, I can get this shape, I can get this material, and go from here. So let's see what else we got. We got spot spray. All right. So did you have any questions, Shannon, about anything that I can go over for you, that I can like help you kind of figure out, or get any kind of tweaks for anything? Mold. Let's add another layer. I'm going to change this to something. Just add another. Let's do material. Car iridescence white. No, beautiful work, right? Beautiful work. You flatter me. You flatter me. Because trust me, it's not beautiful. It's just me adding stuff. Okay. So one thing when I clicked on it, I just noticed it, and I thought maybe I'd just explain it real quick. if you noticed, all of the, when I added the car iridescent paint, which I'm going to take this off because holy crap, when I added that, you notice how you can see everything underneath it. Okay, that's because I put it where I stacked it in the layer stack. So everything that you guys learned in Paul's class, where you guys went over like, how am I doing this, and am I going to have this material and all this kind of stuff, and where it's laid out, that all makes a really good comeback in this, because you can use it for all these different materials, and it's something that you can really like pay attention to, because as you go through and you paint this stuff in like your plastic material, plastic grid, all of that stuff can really help. So if I go ahead and do like this rust, okay, it goes over everything because I put it at the top. But if I put it right below it, it's rusty, but you notice that like the dirt's on top of the rust. Okay, so then again, keep going. Now the dirt and dust are underneath this. Now underneath here. So as you can see, like we're going through and we're going through and we're going through and we're going through, and it can change where your stuff is setting. And then you always want to play around with, you know, having masks and having this work. We're going to go with another generator on this one. I'm going to do the dripping rust one because why not? And you can kind of see like how we're getting this. Do rust spreading, contrast, drips intensity. So you can kind of really see like, look at how cool we can get this stuff like real quick. We've got rust on all the brass pieces. We got all this stuff. We can change to random. We can invert it if we wanted a different look, you know. So we get all this stuff. Drip smoothness, curvature maps, which is fine. Position axis. So all this stuff really gets into it. Like, so I said, like when I see you guys paint stuff and you guys load in, I don't want to just see one thing. I want to see paint layers, and I want to see you guys spending time putting in edges and values in here that change with what you're doing. Okay, so don't be afraid to kind of break this stuff down and paint things and do things. So like if we were to take, let's take this guy, and we have this paint layer. So let's go ahead and I'm going to delete this paint layer, but I'm going to make another one. And I'm going to do a brush. Let's do a calligraphy brush. Shannon, what's your favorite color? Shrink this guy down here. Now I do have a bit of a lag, so I asked her what her favorite color was, and I'm waiting to see what she says, but I know that it's a lag. This black and white information is eventually going to be the mask. Hopefully you're with me. And we're now going to bring it into the. Now I know it works. It's still copied. I'm doing with this as a mouse. Don't judge. Red. All right, cool. All right. So because we're working non-destructive, we can do these things, and I can go in and I can change values. And I've got that kind of, you know, where I can paint in some different values, stuff like that. Always judging, always judging. So you can see like how we kind of painted in something here. We can do all that. They also have these cool things, which are, I think it's under the alphas here. Yes. So we can also do things like this. So if I place this one here, I don't think I can place it there. I might be able to place it. Let's do add a paint layer. Okay, so we add it to the alpha because we added a paint layer, and then we can do font. And let's build this up so you can see where it says substance, right? So let's go ahead and undo that. Let's go ahead and change it. All right. So you can go around and you can change. You have these textures that you can kind of put in. And again, if you change with the if you play with the settings for your fill layer, you can actually go through and you can change some of this stuff so you don't get everything all over the place. But you can kind of go around. Automatic A+. Yeah. Score. So you can sit there and kind of play around with stuff, and you can change fonts, you can do different things, but there's so much stuff that you can do. You can import in your own textures, you can import in your own materials. So this is how this works, and you can also use this to import in stuff from like Photoshop. So if you paint like, I just watched this guy paint a Game Boy, and he painted this thing in there, and he made his own labels and then put them in onto the map, but was able to paint them in. That stuff can really come in handy when you're playing around trying to make your materials. So the biggest thing is just having something texture-wise that you're looking at and kind of saying, this is what I want to do. So again, we're at 1024. If we go 2048, watch what this thing looks like. See the detail we get. All right, and I'm all the way up on it. So if I'm up this way and like we're doing this for for like a shading and lighting project, and you're trying to show off, you'd want to be pretty, you'd want to be like here, okay, where you render. You also want to probably play with the UVs just a teeny bit, because I think the UVs are a little janky on here. So you'd want to sit there and play with it. But as you keep on going, like if you were to do like all this like detail in there, then you may want to stay at 8. All right, so again, so now that we have this, for the last little bit, we go over some of this, we go over all this stuff in the videos, but your environment settings, you have your dome, you have your ground, so you can turn off ground, which is where you get this kind of shape here. We can always change all these values. You got your different skyboxes. So if you wanted to do just a studio shot, all right, and this right here is very useful because as you see this can really help show off models, like if you're trying to show off something to get a job, okay? Because you see how fast this thing renders, right? You do all this work, you get all this like texture work. I can throw this in here and just hit render, and I'm getting these really cool, nice renders. I can then post that somewhere or give that to my boss really fast and show update work while I'm doing something. All right, so as you're playing around, like you have environment rotation, you have all this kind of fun stuff, but you also have camera settings, which is fun. And I enjoy playing with the camera settings because I like photography stuff. So if I was to go and let's do this one, why not? Who cares? This is good. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hold down shift and right mouse button to kind of get this into a nice little shot here. Let's do that. Okay. Now it's a little high. The is standing there a little high, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to adjust the value here so that it's sitting on the ground. All right. And we're going to play with some of this stuff. Now I go over this in some of the other videos, so don't, if you don't get it right away, it's okay. I go over it in a video and you can watch it. You have reflectivity, all this kind of stuff. You also have focal length, focus distance, aperture, all this kind of fun stuff. So if we have our focus distance and our aperture, if we start to play with our aperture, you can see how we're blurring out what's really near us and what's really far away. And then the focus distance, if you can kind of tell as I'm doing this, it'll say what's in focus versus what's not in focus. So if you had a scene with multiple pieces in here, you could dictate which thing was focused and which one wasn't. And you can kind of play around with it. You can see how this is kind of breaking this down and getting all that. Like you can get all this like cool detail. Now another thing is activating post effects. So you have depth of field built in here. You have glare. If you turn this on and adjust your luminance values and stuff, you can see that glare starts to pop up here. Trying to get it to where it'll shine. So you'll get this little glare and things will start popping and glaring and stuff like that. So like all of this kind of comes in handy when you're trying to get and render out the stuff that you're looking for. And this is all stuff that you guys can play with. You have vignetting. You can do the strength of the vignetting. All right, lens distortion. I broke it. Boom, broke. All right, so you can kind of play around with this. Play with edge distortion, you can play with all this, and then you can just turn them off if you don't want to, and you can always restore defaults, which is a great little tool that just kind of automatically pops it back to where you were. But play with these. Excuse me. Play with these. Do some stuff that maybe would be a little different just to see what you can kind of get and mess around with, because you'll get some really cool information out of it, and just kind of just see what you can pull off, because you want to be able to do some cool things, and might as well just play around with something that's easy. So once you get into painting it and you really get the detail in there, go to town, render out some cool stuff. Now, so we've been here for about 55 minutes. Is there anything that anybody would like to discuss real quick before we end it? No? Okay. Don't really see anybody. Nope. Shannon's cool. Awesome. All right. So if there's really nothing else that you guys want to know or anything, we're cool. We don't have to go over anything else tonight. I hope that helped a little bit. At least seeing, using different masks and stuff like that to kind of run what we're doing. And this is what you're going to be doing in your project when you guys are making your TV. I know that you guys have already started your TV. I will be grading all of those tomorrow. That's what I want you guys to be playing around with, and that's what I want you guys to think about while you're doing this stuff. And when you do your own props, when you guys are putting in, there's your own prop assignments later on, spend the time to do all the cool little detail stuff. And remember, subtlety is key. Like adding little things here and there, make these things, be, really get the detail in there. It's going to be awesome. So if you guys are good and I'm good, I will call it a night tonight. Thank you all for coming. I think Shannon was the only one here and maybe somebody else, but thank you, Shannon, for coming. And if you have any questions whatsoever, all you have to do is email me, send me a message on Discord, do anything that can, anything like that, and we can get back to you, okay? Till then, have a good night, and I'll talk to you guys later.